The German Wehrmacht crossed the Polish border on September 1st, 1939, thus beginning the Second World War in Europe. As a direct result, France and the United Kingdom declared war on the German Reich on September 3, 1939, based on their declaration of guarantee for Poland. Only 3 days after the end of the Polish campaign on October 9th, Directive No. 6 for warfare in the West was delivered to the Wehrmacht High Command headquarters, which was located at the Maybach 1 facility in Zossen-Wunsdorf, south of Berlin. The Commander-in-Chief of the Army, Colonel General Walter von Brauchitsch, and the Chief of the Army General Staff, General Franz Halder, were very skeptical and even opposed to Directive No. 6. The army had to be rearmed again after the Polish campaign, and was barely able to carry out an attack in the second half of November due to a lack of ammunition and tanks. Halder in particular pushed for a postponement of the attack. The first attack plan was actually just a new version of the Schlieffen Plan, which was originally developed for the First World War. Although it was slightly improved over time, the basic idea remained unimaginative.
How would they strike this time? The French considered the Maginot Line utterly in Prague countries, as in 1914. So the French massed 78 divisions here along the border of Belgium. The Allied strategy in the event of an attack against the Low Countries was to swing their armies like a gate into Belgium, the hinge being the north end of the Maginot Line. This all-important hinge was protected by the forest of the Ardennes, a hilly and thickly wooded area.
The Wehrmacht High Command recognized that the French and British troops were prepared for such an attack. Therefore, a faster and more aggressive offensive was called for in order to avoid a long war. The Maybach 1 bunker complex was camouflaged as a residential area and was blown up by the Soviet Army in December 1947. The Mechelen Incident refers to the emergency landing of a German aircraft northeast of the Belgian city of Mechelen on January 10, 1940. As a result, parts of the German attack plans for the Western campaign became known, first to the Belgian General Staff and later to the Allies. Major Helmut Rheinberger, an Air Force officer who was responsible for supplies for the 7th Air Division, was supposed to bring orders concerning the offensive from Münster to his staff in Cologne. The winter of 1939-40 was very cold, and the road conditions were wintry. In order to avoid having to take the night train, he contravened orders and accepted the offer of Airbase Commander Major Erich Hoynmans to fly him from Münster-Laudenheide Air Base to Cologne in a Messerschmitt Bf 108. In poor visibility, Hoynmans accidentally flew over the Rhine, which was otherwise used as a guide to Cologne, and flew westwards until he reached the Meuse. Then the engine stopped, forcing an emergency landing in neutral Belgium. After landing, Rheinberger revealed the explosive nature of the papers to the unsuspecting Hoynmans. Both tried to burn the papers. Belgian Corporal Gerard Rubens, who had rushed to the scene of the accident on his bicycle, prevented this. The two Germans were taken to Mechelen for questioning. Here, Rheinberger tried to put the papers in a burning coal stove. Commander Roderick took them out. These two incidents were indications that the papers were extremely important. The Belgians, who could tell from the remnants of the documents that an offensive was planned in violation of Belgian and Dutch neutrality, passed their findings on to the British, French, and Dutch. As a result, Belgian policy toward Germany changed, which in turn reconsidered its offensive strategy and developed new plans. A memorial was erected at the site in the 1950s, which was expanded and modified several years later. After their questioning, the two officers were sent back to Germany. Major Hoynmans and Major Rheinberger were put under investigation. Rheinberger, who was responsible for keeping the document secret, was temporarily detained by a German court-martial and punished for his misconduct. Both officers are believed to have survived the war. At that time, military offices were located in the Electoral Palace in Koblenz on the banks of the Rhine. Halder's rival, Lieutenant General Erich von Manstein, Chief of Staff of the newly formed Army Group A, was working there on the attack plan for the campaign against France. On November 22, 1939, von Manstein and General Guderian, who was also stationed in Koblenz, met at the Electoral Palace to discuss plans for the Western campaign. Manstein developed a completely new concept. He wanted a war of movement, a rolling, never-ending attack that would be carried out only by motorized units. This meeting also discussed Manstein's strategy of conducting a massive armored advance through the Ardennes and forcing a breakthrough to the Channel coast to encircle the French and British troops. Guderian, one of the pioneers of armored warfare, supported the plan because he favored the use of fast armored units. This strategy later went down in history as the Sickle-Cut Plan. The Army High Command, particularly Colonel General Franz Halder, rejected Manstein's plan, considering it too risky. Manstein was transferred to Stettin on February 9, 1940. Halder viewed Manstein as an inconvenient critic and wanted to remove him from the direct decision-making process. Therefore, Manstein was appointed commander of the 38th Army Corps, a semblance of a promotion, but one that removed him from direct influence on operational planning. Ironically, this transfer allowed Manstein to present his plan after all, since he was no longer directly under Halder. Some officers, including Lieutenant General Alfred Jodl, had drawn Hitler's attention to Manstein's idea. The first personal meeting with Erich von Manstein in the Reich Chancellery to discuss the Sickle-Cut Plan took place on February 17, 1940. Manstein personally explained the plan, and the dictator was fascinated by the idea. The Sickle-Cut Plan was subsequently incorporated into the final version of the German offensive strategy. The attack on the Western powers was postponed a total of 29 times. The first planned offensive was scheduled for January 17, 1940, but was repeatedly postponed due to weather conditions and other factors. The last postponement occurred shortly before the actual attack on May 10, 1940.